And alcohol. There's some alcohol. Guinness cupcakes.
Yeah, I mean, it cooks off, there's no.
Oh, it says
Don't ruin it, man,
you.
don't ruin it.
Don't ruin my phone.
I thought that was like some sort of safety code word.
Good evening, everyone. The time is 7:21 p.m. Welcome to the Tuesday, March 25th, 2025 regular meeting of the Stoughton School Committee. This meeting is being recorded by SMAC for future broadcasting.
This meeting is being recorded by SMAC.
Please rise if you're able for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I'd like to recognize the Senator Tel Phillips, Representative Tel Phillips. Representative. I promoted you, sorry.
You just moved into senator already.
I don't need that kind of pressure. Thank you very much.
John, you hit his button.
Good evening, everybody.
John, can you hit this button? Yeah.
We good? Okay. Good evening, everybody. State Representative Ted Phillips. I'm very, very pleased to be here. Just very briefly to say thank you. Catherine, Lindsay, I know that you guys are stepping off the board after a term of service. Serving on any kind of municipal board these days is not easy. And anytime somebody steps forward from our community to devote their time and effort to doing something like making our schools better is worthy of praise. And so on behalf of the Massachusetts House of Representatives, I just wanted to come by and present citations to you both. They both read the same, so I'm just going to say one's to Catherine, one's to Lindsay, in recognition of your dedicated service to the students of the Stoughton Public Schools as a member of the Stoughton School Committee. The entire membership extends very best wishes and expresses the hope for future good fortune and continued success in all endeavors. Given this 25th day of March 2025 at the State House, these citations are signed by Speaker of the House Ron Mariano, State Representative William C. Galvin, and a very proud and grateful State Representative Edward R. Phillips. Thank you both for your service.
Why don't we have you guys over to the side? Yeah, by the flag. Oh, by the flag, I'll take this down right now.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right there.
And we're going to get posed.
Okay.
Stand in front of the flag.
Yes.
Okay.
I should probably put it this way.
How's my hair?
How's my hair? Is that good? All right.
How about mine?
You look great.
That was good, Jeff, that was good.
And one more. Great.
Thank you so much. So funny, the students are so good at that. They go to the edge, go right to the stairs, and immediately for their picture, and then keep walking. It's like clockwork.
Can I just say that's really kind, and want to just acknowledge that there's a lot of folks in this room who are doing the work every day in much harder ways and will continue to do it after April 9th. So thank you to all of you. Like, we have administrators, we have students in the room, so just thank you. And parents, of course, like, thank you for doing that work too. It feels, yeah.
This is, we get recognized by so many other people. We wouldn't be here without everybody else doing everything, so very grateful. All right, the first item on the agenda is public comment, and I believe we have none. I would like to introduce our student advisory representative, Sylvia Michael.
Hello. So this week we have MCAS. We're looking into next month as well. Right now it's 10th graders taking ELA. We're looking into the bio MCAS and math coming up. We have April vacation coming up soon, so we're really just trying to get through those weeks. And spring sports have officially taken off. In terms of student council, we are planning a potential lock-in, it's like a group activity in which all the classes from class of 25 this year to class of 28, and we basically do an activity. We lock in the gym in the high school, and we kind of share activities. All the classes have been collecting class dues, really fundraising, getting as much as we can until the end of the year. And we're hosting a cupcake fundraiser. I saw you guys eating cupcakes and just thought I'd throw that out there. So thank you.
Perfect. All right, thank you. Any questions or comments for Representative? Yes, Chris.
You mentioned a lock-in. I cannot resist. The last time I saw a lock-in at the high school, it was a super spreader event for COVID. So just take precautions, please. And enjoy.
I just had a question. You're not I don't know if you're participating in the reading event, the reading night?
This Thursday.
Yes.
Yes, this Thursday, I believe it's National English Honor Society. They're hosting a reading night. I will be attending. It's hosted by the awesome English teachers, one of them being my own. And it's basically you can swap books, personal reading, share books. It's everything English, reading, and books. And I recommend you go. And there's some teachers offering extra credit. So if you're in need of some extra credit, that's a great opportunity.
Thank you. I'm looking forward to going through with my kids, and I really appreciate the high school kids having these events for all schools. My kids love the trunk or treat in the fall, and so I'm looking forward to this. So thank you to the English Honor Society for that. Anything else? All right. Do we want to move the CPAC up, or do you want to?
Yeah, I was hoping that we could take the CPAC and then the principals for updates, since we're running a little late tonight.
Does anybody object to having our Special Education Parent Advisory Council, CPAC, move that up? No? All right. I would like to recognize Kim Cavey and Megan Teixeira from CPAC, if you want to take. And don't forget to hit the button on the microphone so it's green, so we can hear you.
Hi, everybody. I'm Megan Teixeira. I'm Kim Cavey. Your co-chairs of the CPAC. Thank you for having us here tonight to just give a little bit of an update on what we're working on. And just in case, before I forget or miss out on the chance, I just want to also thank Catherine and Lindsay for all of their service to the students of our town, and especially to Lindsay for being our first CPAC liaison and really helping to give a voice to our special education families. So the CPAC has been pretty busy this year. The last time we kind of all sat together was in November, so I'll just give a quick rundown. In November, we did our basic rights presentation with the Federation for Children with Special Needs. That is one of 2 requirements that we have annually. So we just basically have a meeting where we go over laws and procedures for special education. And this year we focused a lot on the new IEP since that was very relevant. In January, Dr. Baeta came to the CPAC meeting to address questions about things like how redistricting and the school project might impact special education and students across the district. And Ed Clark, our special education director, gave our annual safety presentation, which discusses methods and protocols and procedures used when the physical restraint of students is unavoidable. More importantly, he focused a lot on all of the measures that SPS staff take to continue learning skills in de-escalation techniques to resolve these kind of inevitable situations, in peaceful ways. We wrapped up our quiet room tours, and we'll have more information on that to follow. On March 6th, we had our resource fair at Canton High School in collaboration with the Canton CPAC, and we brought together all types of services and resources and programs for the families in our community. We had, I wanted to especially kind of call out some of the Stoughton organizations that showed up to support us and really meant a lot, like the rec department, the Stoughton Public Library, Oasis, Officer Bondo was there, our school resource officer from the police department. So it was just really nice to have all of those different groups from our town come with us to Canton to just kind of show their support. It was great. And I think families got a lot from that evening. Yeah, I think in total we probably had 30 vendors.
Yeah, it was really successful.
Yeah.
And it was our first year, so we weren't really sure
what it might look like, but we're looking forward to doing it again next year and building on
Yeah,
it.
and maybe we will host in Stoughton next year and we can,
Yeah,
bopping back and forth. It was great.
for sure. This Thursday, we have Deb Booth from the Pilgrim Area Collaborative coming to give a presentation called Social Matters. And it's basically, if you have concerns about your child with peer interactions and play dates and having a hard time connecting with other children, it's a workshop all about just how to start thinking about social skills and social thinking and how we can help our kids make those connections. That will be at Stoughton High School, room A216. At 6 o'clock, we'll do a quick CPAC meeting, and then the presentation will start at 6:30. And that's also a hybrid meeting. All of our meetings are hybrid, so there's Zoom links available as well. And then on April 17th, we are doing another Pilgrim Area Collaborative speaker. This presentation is put on by an autistic adult named Patricia Menzel, and she comes and gives her perspective about what her life is like, essentially, and helps give like a deeper, introspective into how we might be able to sort of use her experience to relate better to our kids. And then in May, we'll do our CPAC wrap-up and our elections, and then start planning for next year. So, but this has been our best year yet, and we're really grateful for all of the
Yeah, we
support.
definitely learned a lot and excited to get planning
Keep
for
it
next
going.
year. Yeah.
So that's what I have on that front.
Thank you. I just want to say, I have heard so many great things about that resource fair from everybody,
you.
like people around town, staff, parents, just really well done. That was excellent. I'm just really excited about all that you've accomplished.
Thank you so much.
Well done. Really, really appreciate all you're doing for the students.
Thank you.
Any questions, comments? Oh, sorry, go
I
ahead.
was going to take it in a little bit of a different direction. I just wanted to speak about tonight, what the community, the special education, special ed parents are experiencing in our community these days. First of all, I think out in the community, there is a huge misunderstanding on what it means to be a special education parent. Becoming a parent is a magical experience, right? It is joyful and painful and difficult and rewarding in all circumstances all the time. But a typical experience for a special education parent begins with a call from the school saying we have some concerns, or sitting down with a doctor and saying, the test shows. So I remember those moments like very vividly in my own personal life, and just immediately knowing that we were diverging from the typical path onto something unknown and something with roadblocks that I couldn't remove and I also didn't fully understand. So, into the special education programs at public schools, all of us parents go, and we're truly at the mercy of what the special ed program can provide in our district, and everybody's kind of doing the best that we can and working it through. It's not always easy. I've sat in a lot of meetings being told, but is it preventing them from accessing the curriculum? And you're like, luckily, there are angels among us, and there are people on the SPS staff that learn our children and love our children and do a lot, and you eventually, settle into a new normal of what managing these roadblocks will look like. But, unfortunately, right now, we feel like our community is under attack. Obviously at the federal level, but even within our community, in our own backyard, we have elected officials, community members, people running for these chairs on the school committee that are actively campaigning against the supports provided to our students. First of all, interchanging the term special education with high needs is inappropriate and frankly fairly ignorant. Also, not a single student in this district needs to be fixed, right? Secondly, meeting the needs of special education students is required by law. And so saying that by taking on the grants and driving home, how taking on those grants is just driving people to our community is inaccurate. Stoughton is not the mecca of special education. No offense, but it's not. In our community, we're only servicing children that live in Stoughton. So if you move to Stoughton, by law, Stoughton is going to meet your needs. So, besides the legal implications of these positions, it's frankly immoral to be attacking the vulnerable the way that we've been experiencing. These objectives of not taking the state and federal grants to deter special education families from moving to Stoughton is frankly asinine. It shows a complete misunderstanding of how a special education family becomes a special education family. Any family in Stoughton can suddenly find themselves on the other end of one of those phone calls or one of those doctor's appointments. The attack on our community, on people doing the best that they can, is disheartening and disturbing. With the upcoming school committee election, we need to ensure that we are electing officials who support all students across all of Stoughton. It's not all bad news. We do know we have allies and advocates in this community, many of which are in this room right now, but we need more. We need our fellow families to stand up and support students across our schools who continue to contribute to enriched and diverse student experiences in our community. We appreciate the opportunity to address the school committee tonight, and we continue to be yours in partnership. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments, Chris?
So I'd like to double down on what Catherine said. I really appreciate the resource fair that you put together. It's something that I really would have benefited from 13 years ago. So thank you for doing that for the families and for families that find themselves in that situation. If it's unexpected, finding a network of support, it means the world. And I just wanted to share that I was really personally impacted when you spoke of families feeling like they're under attack. So thank you for sharing your story.
Thank you. Chris. I'm sorry, Karen. I was looking at Chris.
Interchangeable. So thank you for coming here. I know it's hard to talk about this kind of stuff because when it comes to our kids, the emotions, it's hard to just take a breath and say what needs to be said. And I just want to say thank you for saying what needed to be said. I appreciate you guys and know that we are always here for you guys.
Thank you. I'm really excited about this partnership that we've established, the liaisons with the school committee, and that I think it gives us a much more insight into what's happening on the ground, what our families need, what our students need, and I'm looking forward to having this continue. So, well done, and I hope you have a great rest of the year and come back to us. And, we look forward to hearing more from you.
It will be.
Yes. Yes. Thank you. If the committee doesn't mind, I'd like to head to, under unfinished business, the South Elementary School building needs update. We have some principals here who have come to kind of continue discussions. Does anybody mind if we take that up real quick? All right. I don't want to have them hanging around much longer than needed, but I've invited Ms. Monahan, principal of the Wilkins, and Mr. Dorr, principal of the South Elementary, to continue with the full committee and with our student representative as well. The discussion that we had last week on Around Town with David Walsh, soon to be available for your viewing pleasure on SMAC, about the new elementary school building project's impact on pre-K through 5, but especially K through 5 education in Stoughton. I thought we had a great conversation on how the education plan, and remember Ms. Monahan and Mr. Dorr were the main principal authors of that plan, how that's driving education in Stoughton, as well as the design of the new school. But one of the things that we keep finding out, or we keep hearing, the principals have heard, I've gotten questions, the school committee, I know Dr. Breda has heard as well. We've had families ask about how the opening of the new elementary school will benefit or otherwise affect their student experience, and how that would compare to having the modulars. So we've have some questions I think that I'd like to ask to kind of get this conversation continuing about what it looks like to have the new elementary school versus the modulars and get a better understanding of that so parents have the information they need to vote on April 8th. So I think, do you want to start with kind of like how would, simple things like lunch work with a new school versus the modulars, things like recess, library? Do you want to kind of talk about, what that would look like at the two options that we're looking at?
Sure, and I'm just very quickly, before we jump in, on behalf of all of the principals, we wanted to make sure that we took just a moment to thank both you, Catherine and Lindsay, for your countless hours of service and your unwavering support of the schools. We really appreciate it. Thank you so much. And on to the new school project. So one of the things that we've heard a lot about is, like you just mentioned, like how will lunches be handled? How will they change if the building is built or if it's not? I think, honestly, if the building is built and the vote passes on the 8th, there probably will not be too much of a change at the current existing schools. We right now have 3 lunches, and I don't foresee that will probably change. The new school has also, have a tentative schedule of having 3 lunches as well. That makes a lot of sense. The timing of the day would remain, not impacted at all. I think the bigger point to talk about is what would happen if we had to have modulars placed on the properties of all the schools and the impact that would have on a schedule such as the lunch. I know specifically at the Wilkins, if we have any more students really beyond what we currently have, we simply do not have the capacity in my cafeteria to have more students than what we currently have without, maybe 10 or so students. It's just, we are at full capacity. So for the Wilkins specifically, we'll be looking at adding a 4th lunch probably, and that would be pushing lunch up before. Right now, my lunch starts at 11. It goes all the way until 1:15. So we would be pushing either all the way up to 10:15 or going all the way until 2 o'clock. So, I mean, you can see that is just not ideal in any shape or form. I do know that would be very similar at the other schools as well, because there simply is not the space in the cafeteria to absorb all of the extra students that would be coming if there is no South School and no new building.
I think we're just kind of at max capacity in all the schools right now. So, the South currently has 3 lunch schedules. We can max fit 100 kids per lunch. I mean, we have a little bit of space, but not much. And any more students would definitely. I mean, we've wavered between 295 and 320 this year. So it's definitely when we're closer to 320, we're at full capacity. But I know it's similar at the Dawn, at the Gibbons. They have a max capacity. And if you were to add modulars to that space and another 100 kids, you're looking at 4th lunches in those buildings as well. So I think it's just that's pretty much the reality of, a new school definitely gives us more space. The new building is designed for 200 kids, roughly, even a little bit more per seating. So it would give you comfortably 3 lunch periods in a new building, which is appropriate. But yeah, it's very similar. You're looking at, 10:30 lunch times, realistically. And then I think you would have to, Dr. Baeta, you might know a little bit better. You probably would have to go to the cafeteria workers unions as well, because you would be extending somewhere along the line their work days as well.
Yeah, their workday would have to be extended, and product production is going to be a major problem at 3 of the schools because of the size of the kitchens.
Yep.
So you're talking about more product having to be made earlier, therefore sitting or in heaters and that type of stuff. The only other option that is as bad as that one, because I think eating at 10:30 in the morning would probably require that first lunch probably has to have some type of a snack break in the afternoon.
Yeah.
And the only other option that some districts have done as temporary situations, not as something that could happen for a decade or more in a modular situation, that would be rotating who eats out of the classrooms. So you start with your kindergartners, they eat in the classroom for X number of weeks, then you rotate and you rotate and you rotate so that everybody can actually move. And those are awful situations. First of all, they're not good for the children. Second of all, they're not good for the facilities, if you know what I mean, in terms of food and more food in classrooms. And more work. Now you're adding more custodial support, because you can't just leave those bags of thrown out food, in the classroom until 3 o'clock in the afternoon. So there's a lot of complicating factors that go with any direction that we take.
I think that another part of this also is, I know at the Wilkins, we serve breakfast to almost all of our students, and they all come at the same time. So you can imagine when you have 330 students trying to get breakfast within a half hour, how busy that space is. I cannot imagine if we had more students trying to just get them fed and have them eat in that short amount of time. I'm not suggesting that the school day be altered, but it does complicate, all of how we get our school day started when you're trying to get that many kiddos fed with, in breakfast. And I can't, and I'm sure that it's very similar at the other schools as well.
Yeah, I think we're all heavily utilizing breakfast, especially because it's a good option for kids to be able to come to school and eat breakfast. We have. We can only speak for these two schools here, but I know you're serving a lot of breakfast, and we definitely have, at least a third of the population getting breakfast every day at the South. So, and it depends on the day, but it's typically more. I think the other piece that's important here is most of the elementary schools utilize the cafetorium spaces as academic space. So it would really impact the days. I mean, the South has music every day on the stage in the cafeteria, and if you've been to that location, it's right there. Those classes are impacted as it is, a limited amount, but adding any more, the DAW uses the stage, the Hanson uses the stage, and then I know those three schools do for sure. And then, we're also now at the point where the South also has computers on the stage some days because that's a better location than some other alternatives, or it's just another academic space that's not the hallway. And I know that Hanson utilizes the hallway for band. We're utilizing the hallway for band.
Yeah, we are
I think
too.
you're using the hallway. The DAW is using the hallway. So we're already at a space where we're using bands and corridors for academic and music spaces as it is. So in all those buildings, adding another 100 students is, I don't know what that's going to look like. So.
And I think also right now, we provide special periods for all of our students. So we have, the art, the music, technology, physical education, and the learning commons period as a special that the students go to. And right now, at many of our schools, we don't have learning commons anymore. So we don't have a library space for our students to go. If the school vote passes and we vote yes successfully on the 8th, and the building is built, then that will alleviate some of the overcrowding that we have in our current buildings, which would allow us to then bring back some of these spaces into our schools that right now we're forced to use as classrooms. And I think that's a really big point to continue to bring up, that right now we're using classroom spaces to hold these specials. The new school has spaces that are designed for these types of specials. We have a huge learning commons as part of the plan. There is art spaces, I think, on the 3rd floor. We have music spaces right next to, the auditorium in the new building. So they are not classroom spaces. They are their own dedicated spaces for these specials, whereas in our schools, we're using classroom spaces for that. Right. And if we have modulars put on our property and we have that many more students, we will still provide those specials for them, but they'll be in their classroom, or they'll be in the hall, or they'll be on the stage. It's not ideal at all.
I think it allows you to just thoughtfully design where things are located within your building, right? So by having a new building open up one that's already thoughtfully designed. So none of, when we designed that model, none of the music and gym and even art to an extent aren't anywhere near classrooms. So really it's you go to that space, if music is loud, you're not hearing it in all the first grade classrooms. It also allows Principal Cancelleri and Gulia and Hanson to be able to go it would make more sense for my art room to be over here in this room as opposed to it being right in the middle of 3 kindergartens or wherever it's located right now. I think it allows us to reclaim the spaces that right now have been lost because we're adding classrooms, which we need to add, but they're also not ideal. My old library, which is not a library and has not been a library for some time, is now 2 office spaces and a special education sub-separate classroom. So, that's not ideal, but it's the only space that makes sense for that current setup right now. There's no other options in that building. And even when you walk down my corridor, what it used to be was a 3rd grade classroom, a music classroom, an art classroom, right on top of each other. And so for a lot of time, that 3rd grade classroom was nestled right next to, recorders. So this allows you to do some different things in all of these buildings with a new space coming online. I think modulars just continue to
Limit.
crush the classes inwards and make those spaces.
Yeah, and
You know.
I think though, thinking positively, that we will all vote yes on the 8th and the new school is built. I think it's also important to talk about how, if your child is redistricted to one of the other schools, how the educational experience for them at the Daw, the Hanson, or the Gibbons will really be very similar to what the students in the new building are going to be experiencing. And for example, the Daw and the Gibbons specifically, they have gym spaces with bleachers, retractable bleachers currently. That is what we're proposing for the new school. So those two other schools that we already have the same kind of facility in them that the new building will have.
Right.
The size of the cafeterias at the Gibbons and the Daw are very, very similar in square footage to that which is being proposed in the new building. They have a separate playground space for their early childhood students at the Gibbons and the Daw. That is, again, what's being proposed at the newer building, the new building. The Hanson does not have the same size, without a doubt. We all know that. But we have to keep in mind that the enrollment of that school would not be as large. And so
they're adding a playground.
And they're getting a new playground. So those common area spaces that are at the Hanson will be more adequate given the enrollment that school will have if the new building is built.
You also have an early childhood playground that's made to be relocated from the South School. So just another thing that you could put at the Hanson to level the playing field at all the buildings.
And then I think another thing too is one of the biggest things that we're really promoting is this idea of having a STEM lab, STEAM space at the new building. And that is definitely something that we could replicate at the other schools, because we would have, again, a classroom that would be freed up because the overcrowding would not be the same as it is right now. So one of the classroom spaces at the other existing schools would be outfitted in exactly the same way with the same materials as what would be in the new building. So again, when you're thinking of the kinds of educational experiences that we'll be able to offer to students if the vote passes yes on the 8th, it's without a doubt a better educational experience for all of the students in Stoughton compared to what we're able to offer now. And that doesn't even get into the negatives that would come with having to add modular spaces onto the properties of all of those schools.
I think you got to look at it. We've had a lot of conversations. We talk a lot about this project, as you can tell, and from our last presentation. But I think the one thing you can kind of look at it is, and not to be bleak, but either we're raising the level for everyone by opening the new building across all the buildings, or we're lowering the level for everyone by adding stuff at all the other buildings. Like, that's kind of the way we've talked about it. So either way, you're leveling the playing field one way or another. And I think it's just the reality of what it looks like with those spaces. I mean, I went to a middle school that had modulars when I was a student, and I've been to OMS. I mean, that's the reality. Like, that doesn't change what that looks like. I mean, yes, there is a new space added on, but I think it's going to be really important to know like what that actually looks like for kids and for staff and for everyone else. And one of the really important things for us too is this idea of like community spaces, and we're going to continue to go back to it. By opening a new building, you have a couple of different community spaces that are popping up all over town. You have the Gibbons, you have the Daw, you would have the new elementary school online that all could host events for this community. And the Hanson has a decent sized space as well. So I think overall, like, you're really adding to the culture of the town. You're really adding to the spaces that are available, and you're adding to the opportunities for elementary age kids and families in the community by bringing everything online. I think in the end, with the additional spaces taking over the rest of the grounds at all these buildings, you're just detracting from that overall. I mean, that's just the reality. I wish I could say it was better, but.
I wonder if you could speak specifically to, we just had the CPAC here, this, special education in EL, I think would face the same issues as specials, where you're already having those counselors in closets and classes being held in halls, and adding modulars and having even more students just kind of compounds that as well. I don't know if there's anything you want to add about, the new building has these specific spaces that have been designed for these classrooms as well.
I think it's just the idea of reclaiming space in the buildings. Like, I know if you talk to specifically the Daw and the Gibbons are basically mirrors of each other, right? So I think if you're able to reclaim some of those spaces by just redistributing in a more appropriate way, you just have more opportunities for EL-sized classrooms, for special ed spaces that just make more sense to those buildings and for what those staff need and what those kids need.
And I think, too, the ability to be more inclusive with those students would increase substantially because you could be more mindful of the placement of those classes. They're integrated within the wings of the new school, so the students that have those services, whether they're special education services or English language education services, they're already right there with their peers. You know, right now, those classes are put where we have space. And, you know, again, it's all about freeing up the resources within our schools. So we could then potentially place them in other areas where they are more part of the school environment authentically. You know, right now, in my particular school, I will have 2 TLC classrooms next year. And they've been embraced and welcomed without a doubt within our school community. But by virtue of the way my building is built, they are literally on the first floor and down the hall by themselves. You know, and that placement could be better thought out if there were more options for spacing. So I think that that's something to consider as well.
And I know I'm not totally confident on the restrictions, and maybe Dr. B or Mr. Ford could talk about this, but I know there are restrictions on who can be in the modulars as well. So I think when you talk about specialized populations, be really careful about, like, I've heard some people be like, oh, well, are the specialized programs going to go into the modulars? And I'm like, no, it's probably going to be a classroom or a grade level or some other situation. You know, apart from the open, you know, hallway situation between the buildings, I think we have to be really careful about who ends up in those modulars. Not that it would be either of our buildings, but that would have to be something to keep in mind.
I do think the Wilkins is slated to
Yes,
be modular,
yes, sorry,
right?
yeah.
Can you speak as well about kind of the outdoor, how this is going to affect the outdoors? We've looked at the plans and we've seen that, you know, the Don, the Gibbons lose outdoor recess space, but even at the other schools, the Wilkins is going to be a nightmare having that. But, you know, one of the things the new building would bring would be the opportunity for outdoor learning spaces. And it's going to be very difficult. I don't know if you've even thought about how you could possibly have outdoor learning experiences if you had modulars versus if we don't have modulars, if we do have this new building, are there ways we can incorporate the outdoor learning into the other existing buildings?
I mean, I think obviously it wouldn't be hard to do if we had the new building. I mean, there are so many places outside of the schools, the Dawn, the Gibbons, and the Hanson right now. They already are using some of those spaces right now for outdoor learning experiences for those kids, as are the students at the South and the Wilkins.
Yeah.
But if we don't pass and it's a no vote on the 8th and we're putting modulars up in our outdoor spaces, I mean, at the Wilkins, that's my front lawn. I mean, that is where my outdoor learning has to happen right now. So there would be no option or opportunities for kids to have some outdoor learning. You know, they'd be right there with the modulars. So that would be, you know, obviously not ideal at the Wilkins. And I know that even at the Gibbons and the Daw and the Hanson, I mean, that's space that's taking up from where the kids are going out and learning now. So, I mean, it definitely...
I mean, I think you're looking at like a little bit of a culture killer at a lot of these buildings when you're talking about like taking out the outdoor spaces from, I mean, we shared a space the last couple of years when the Dawn and the South did the trunk or treat together. We utilized that space. That space would be gone completely. So, I mean, it wouldn't be gone. It would be classrooms. But you're talking about a real change to a lot of what has gone on in those communities. Like, I would imagine if that was happening at the South, I know it's not on the table, but if that was happening on the existing spaces, I mean, it would be the end of what we could do for outdoor education as a whole. So I think the new building provides some insight as to what could be replicated at the other buildings. Like, for example, I know the DAW has an outdoor classroom. That's something that could easily be replicated at the Gibbons and the Hanson. And I think that those opportunities are there if that existed at the new building. I think there's a lot of ability for those spaces to be replicated and for everyone to have a lot of the same opportunities with the recess spaces for the early childhood kids and for the upper elementary, and then also having those educational spaces as well outside.
Thank you. Any questions from the committee? Sylvia, do you have any questions about, you know, you've gone through the elementary school experience a little bit recently. Yeah. Any thoughts about what it would be like having modulars at the guns? Or?
So actually, I experienced modulars in middle school. We had modulars for like the language departments. And I never really understood why it was there, but coming to these meetings, I now understand what the reason, like the cause for those were. And I like the idea of like a STEM room. We actually implemented one in the middle school, I believe, and it's been ongoing, and I feel like that's really beneficial. And recently, like even in the high school, kids eat outside. Like we try and go outside as the weather gets better, and I definitely like appreciate the outdoor experience. And yeah, I really like that you took that into consideration.
I think that's an important point, is where we're creating a more cohesive experience and leading kids through kind of a full program from pre-K even all the way through high school now. They'll have STEM all the way through. They'll have the outdoor learning experience, or at least the opportunity to go outside. We'll have the collaborative learning spaces. We'll have, the specialized programs will be able to continue all the way through and have really more cohesive. And I like that. I think that's great that we're moving towards, the experience being more consistent and more focused and targeted.
Yeah, I really think, well, first of all, thank you to Ms. Monahan and Mr. Dorr for kind of just getting in a little bit into the weeds about what the impact would be at our schools with our youngest students, right? The other thing is we have to be honest with each other. We're in 2025, and Stoughton is still thinking about starting, quote, elementary STEM. We are behind, folks. Let's just look in the mirror. And so it's important for us to really, make this, and I think, to Katie, your comment, I think, was so clearly articulated, that the opportunity for a new building is an opportunity for all of our buildings, and for us to really look at curriculum instruction and what we're doing because of alleviating spaces and so on and so forth, versus modular classrooms taking away further learning spaces, regardless if it's a recess for learning or if it's the recess area for more structured learning. And potentially, if you take away that, then you're taking away an area that's a field behind your school, and so on. The most implication for modulars is the Wilkins School, hands down, has the most implications, because it's not just looking at the front of the building, it's also looking at the back of the building. And that has significant issues as well, especially as we have increased specialized classrooms and increased enrollment. You'll see from the NESDEC report that I provided to you, the spring update, we're up 17 students from October. We're projected to be up 108 students over the next few years at O'Donnell Middle School. And we're projected, our seventh grade this year has picked up 12 students, in our high school 12th grade has picked up 22 kids this year. So we know where our numbers are lying in pre-K to 12 in terms of enrollment increases. But the other part that's just to kind of piggyback on what the two of you said is that the managing of these buildings becomes very, very difficult. I don't know any school system, and I just visited one, as some of you know, with modulars that didn't have to also add more staffing, i.e. assistant principals had to be added. It's just too much of a physical space for you never to be out on the modulars, because you're extending yourself. And some of our schools are already pretty significantly large. The Wilkins, the Daw, the Gibbons in particular are pretty significant size spaces in terms of 2 floors. So managing that day to day becomes a little bit more of an issue. And then lastly, talking about lunches for me is something that doesn't hit home for people, but we are a community where hot meals served to a significant number of our students, either as breakfast or lunch, is important, regardless of what others may think. It's important. It's a way to really positively impact kids' learning. So keep that in mind as we're looking at the next steps for the school community.
Thank you. Any questions or comments from the committee? Armando? Yes.
One of the things I've enjoyed as my kids went through school is those holiday events in which parents come in. Can you sort of describe what that would be with modules and parking space and the number of parents going into more students in the school?
I mean, I can speak specifically for the Wilkins. I know that you get into capacity issues. There's basic fire codes that we have to, abide by when we have events. So it would most likely have a huge impact on whether or not we could have whole school community events. It would probably end up being more of a case where we could do a few grades at a time, which is such a shame, right? We hold at our school at least 2 school-wide events a year right now that are hugely attended and are beneficial to the families. And the idea of not being able to do that, I don't think we would be able to do it. We wouldn't be able to accommodate the parking. We wouldn't be able to have that many bodies in the building when you have parents and their children all at the same time. And again, that becomes you're very divided. If you're inviting pre-K to 2 one night and 3 through 5, I don't think it's a very positive direction to move in, but I do not foresee how we would be able to have all of our families in the building at once because we don't have the capacity to have them all.
Yeah. I chuckle every time we talk about parking because if you've ever been to the South School, it's a joke. I mean, we take over the entire neighborhood. We're down Ash Street, we're down Cedar, we're down cul-de-sacs, we're parking in people's driveways. Like, it's a disaster every time we do anything. That being said, everyone knows when there's an event at the South. And we have a lot of events. And so I think the way that, you operate with 300 kids in a small school now is the way you would now be operating at the rest of the schools, right? So that's kind of what I would predict it would look like. Mm-hmm. So you're having 2 winter concerts, if not 3, because you can't fit all the grades in the space and you can't fit all the parents that come, and you want to be able to support them. When you do night events, your night events are longer because you have to be able to get waves of people in. You have to just extend all the opportunities so that, and I'm just taking what I know the South's current situation is and then applying it times 100 kids at these other buildings and what it would look like, because it would create a similar capacity issue. I mean, right now when we go to the other schools, it's already hard to park at the Daw, it's already hard to park at the Gibbons, and I can't imagine what that would look like if you add that many families to those situations. Mm-hmm. I mean, for example, if anyone in this room has come by, parking is at a premium, so pickup at the South starts at 12:15. That is when people start lining up to pick up. You see the cars, so that's something to keep in mind.
Yeah, let's just speak facts to facts. The idea of a whole school is already problematic when we have either just mom or dad or mom and dad or 2 moms, 2 dads, grandparent, whatever the family makeup is, an uncle, an aunt that's coming, a grandparent. The fact of the matter is, holding any of those events, the diversity fairs, the multicultural fairs, any of that stuff that we do within our cafeterias would have to be staggered by adding, because none of those buildings' actual spaces are built for those types of numbers. So, or you would have to take the sense of elementary community out and move everything to the high school, which also has significant expense lines that go with it. But true, exactly. You move everything to, and that really does take away from the idea of building community over time at an elementary school where the kids are there in our district for 6 years if they've come to our building since kindergarten. So.
And that's going to be very difficult for families to have that staggered or to relocate. I think my kids always manage to miss that cutoff of the staggered, and so I end up spending 4 hours at the school for winter concerts or field day or whatever it is. And if you have 3 or more kids, you're going to spend up, and you're not going to save parking by staggering it in the end. It really does complicate matters. Any other questions or comments? Armando?
Yeah, I just, when I've gone to these events, I always see grandparents there, and having them drive in and find parking and make it into the school is going to be a bit of a disaster, especially when you have rainy days or something like that.
That's a great point. Your events are going to be like the rain graduation day. Here's your 2 tickets, and pick whoever you want, but you don't just have an open floor plan, if you will. Those are the type of things you would have to think of, because we do have to worry about fire code and evacuating a building. That's still at the top. It's still a top job. I mean, we do it now, and we're really careful and really mindful to make sure that everybody knows where exits are and all of that stuff. But when you purposely know you have an overflow, that's a liability.
So anyway, any other questions or comments? I want to thank Ms. Monahan and Mr. Dorr for coming in and yet again and answering. I want to thank them and all the principals and everybody else for all their work on the educational part of this school. I think you've seen how much thought has gone into the new building, and how much there is to think about if this new building doesn't pass. So I really appreciate it. Thank you for your time. So, thank you. All right, we're gonna jump back in time to the superintendent update. So
Yeah, thank you. I'll be very brief this evening. You have it. I was just telling the chair, it took me till almost your last meeting, I guess, but the idea was to always have these links during the meeting so I could just bring them up, and they're in your packet. So one of them is the Day on the Hill on May 6th, for the committee members that will be here. I'll bring it up again, by the way. Good night. I want to thank the Select Board for their recent resolution on the monies coming off of the high school project 10102, voted in May 2016, and the potential for reallocation of approximately $2 million to the South Elementary School project pending an annual or special town meeting. So thanks to them for organizing that, and I know that Mr. Coulter was a proponent of this as well. And just in and not up there is the remote meeting flexibility has been extended pending the governor signing it until June of 2027. Very good news, because I think it keeps people involved in our local government, especially here. And I just briefly told you about the NESDEC report. Again, you'll see this is year 2, next year's year 3. The data's getting better, and better, but we're plus 17 students since the October, with 2 significant areas, the 7th grade up 12 students and the 12th grade up 22 students. And then everybody else basically in the single digits and plus or minus. But again, we continue to show that growth as a district. And then there's a note in the report that I highlighted, if I remember correctly, which clearly articulates that the district at OMS in particular is looking at some numbers. It's in the first page, last paragraph, where it says that grade 7 increased enrollment, blah, 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 and it goes on to say, over the next 3 years, grades 6 to 8 enrollments are projected to be increased by 108 students at OMS over the next 3 years. That's a pretty significant increase. And grades 9 to 12 enrollment are projected to decrease by 16 students. That hasn't really held, but the fact is, based on that 22 that we just saw, but that's not a bad thing, because that'll bring us down under that 1,100 number, which is really where we want to be for the building that we've built. So that is all at this time, Madam Chair. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Any questions or comments for the superintendent? Nope. All right, moving on to the succession plan update for the superintendent of schools. I will turn it over to Lindsay and Armando for an update.
Yeah, I just want to share, we have been having conversations with the candidate, high school principal Julie Miller. I think conversations with the candidate are going really well. We're making a lot of progress and just excited to have a more substantial update soon.
Thank you. The next item on the agenda is appointments, and I just want to note, in order for the school committee to continue its operations with no interruptions between the election and the first school committee meeting of the new term, when the committee will reorganize, I would like to bring forth 2 nominations, if the committee is amenable. I want to be clear, this is just so that there's somebody there to sign important documents between April 9th and April 15th. You're welcome to change these nominations at your first meeting after the election. So the first one is warrants. Lindsay and I are currently on warrants. Yes.
Sorry, can I just clarify? This is so semantics, but I just want to make sure we're clear. Is this is not a nomination, but a chair appointment?
Chair appointment,
okay.
sorry, yes.
Sorry.
Chair appointment.
Thank you.
Yes, a chair appointment just to fill that space, and then the new chair and the new committee is welcome to keep or change these. Lindsay and I are currently on warrants. With us both gone, I think it makes sense to have somebody come on. So Lindsay, if you don't mind, I will take you off, and I would like to nominate Armando to step on to be warrants for this, and then I would like to appoint Armando to, thank you for the semantics, to the warrants for that. And the next is the new elementary school building committee. This one's a little bit tricky because it is technically the town manager's recommendation. So this would be a recommendation for somebody to take my position on the building committee. I am still going to be fighting for the school. It's not me stepping down from the duty, but I hope the vote passes, and if we need to sign something on April 9th to send to the MSBA saying, yep, the vote passed, we're good to go, I want there to be someone to sign that. So would anybody like to be on the building, would like to be recommended for the building committee? Armando? All right. Thank you, Armando. Thank you, Armando, for taking in all these. And again, thank all of you for your time at all of your duties. You guys have taken on so much work. I appreciate it all. I really appreciate your willingness to join this. So I will pass on that recommendation. Yes.
Sorry, just wanted to clarify, warrants is effective like immediately.
Yes.
And building committee would be effective April 9th,
April
pending
9th.
town manager recommendation?
Yes, exactly.
Okay, thank you, sorry, I
Yes.
just want to make sure I'm clear.
And so I will coordinate with the business office to make sure that you're on board so that things can get signed. All right. Thanks for the recommendation. Thanks for keeping me honest always, Lindsay. And Chris, too, you're always good with wording. The next, we have 2 requests for field trips. One is an overnight and out-of-state field trip request. This is for 3 representatives from the Stoughton High School DECA chapter have been invited to the DECA International Career Development Conference in Florida next month. So this is rather timely. So they've asked for us to approve this per our policy. Any questions about this? Chris?
I was going to make a motion.
Okay, please do.
I'd like to make a motion to approve the DECA request for an overnight trip to Florida.
All right, that motion was made by Chris. Is there a second?
Second.
All right, second by Lindsay. Any further questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right, that is carried 5-0.
Godspeed, DECA.
Yes, best of luck. That is awesome. I hope you have a great experience. The next is an overnight out-of-country field trip request. This is a trip organized by Mr. Gorman, a Latin teacher from Stoughton High School, and Miss Dancy, an art teacher from Stoughton High School. This will be organized via third party, and this trip is to Italy, to Rome and Sorrento. I think they should take us. But, I'm not going to even joke about that. Do we have a motion to approve the request?
I would like to make a motion to approve the request for an out-of-country trip to Italy and say it's about time. Ciao, Bella.
A motion is made by Chris, a second.
Second.
All right, second by Lindsay. All in favor?
Aye.
Sure.
Oh.
Ask a question.
So this trip to Italy, I'm trying to look at the financials. What is the financial, what is the school responsible for, the district?
The district has no responsibility to payment for students who attend.
What about for staff?
The staff, any staff that goes is part of the cost that's put into the actual trip. So we do not have to pick up that cost.
So this is no cost to the district at all?
That is correct.
Okay, and does that include?
Let me rephrase that. If they left on a Thursday and I had a substitute on Friday,
That was
there
my
would be,
question.
there would be a cost to us, but
A
that
cost
would
of
be.
just a substitute for the day?
Exactly. That would be the typical.
How many teachers?
I believe this is 2, but it will depend on the number of students who attend. We try to keep our ratio at 10-1. And then also they are supported by the third party, usually on premise there, that basically takes the kids and the staff to wherever they're going, in this particular one where they're going to multiple sites.
Okay, so this would only cost the district a few substitutes, basically?
If that, exactly.
Okay, awesome.
Any further questions? They're all good questions. Good to know. Any other questions?
I am very happy to be appointed a chaperone, if you'd like to take that vote. I have no problem attending whatsoever.
That may be the cost of the district.
I'm happy to stay up 24/7 if.
Didn't you say you're retiring?
Retiring
Step
and going
aside,
to the
man.
travel
Step aside.
All right.
I do think it's important for us to get back to getting our kids excited about what the world is about. So I hope that you endorse this as one of our first trips that we're doing this in a long time.
All right, I agree. All in favor?
Aye.
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 All right, that passes 5-0. So ciao, enjoy.
Mangia.
Try something more than pasta and pizza.
Bagel.
Yeah. I'll tell you my funny Italy story some other time. We need to keep going. So we had the building principals presented. Thank them for coming. I want to just do a quick recap of the elementary school building committee. We met on the 19th. A few points that came up. One is that the South School has not been neglected. The quote that I wrote down for my notes is, "Deferred maintenance doesn't mean zero maintenance." So the South School has been maintained, there's been repairs, replacements done strategically. At the same time, the district has invested in other buildings. So there has been a lot of very thoughtful caretaking of all of our facilities. One thing I want to note is the South School roof was replaced in 1988 and 1995. So I'm going to let that sink in, what you know about roofs and how long they last. It has been maintained and patched over the decades, but it's not eligible for the MSBA Accelerated Repair Program. That building is going to be replaced. Sinking that much money into it doesn't make a lot of sense. And also the cost of repairing the roof exceeds the threshold that triggers full code compliance. So a review, 30% of the total value of that building over 3 years. Right now that building's value is $3.9 million or so. So anything over $1.3 million triggers full ADA compliance, fire code, everything else. A couple of the other repairs that have been pointed out, that boiler is original to 1958. It would cost at least $3 million to repair. Replacing 40% of the windows, that's not a magic. I think that's about the percent that are the terrible plexiglass. That's at least 1.5, if not closer to $2 million. So any of those repairs would become, that's how a $1.5 million repair becomes a $54.5 million repair, is if we have to do that. So that building is really at the end of its life in terms of being able to maintain and repair it. Another point that came up is the school committee first submitted a statement of interest for the South School to the MSBA in 2010. It took 13 consecutive years of submission before it was accepted. So I think that's a really important point for everybody who goes, oh, we'll just resubmit and the MSBA will take us right back up. There's no guarantee. And that school has been in desperate need of repair that entire time. Jonathan, do you have more context on that? You look like you want to ask.
I also want to say that if this in fact goes down, they're not even going to look at the building for a decade, even if we resubmit. Because one of the things that they take into consideration is the community's willingness to fund a building. So if we don't fund the building now, it's pretty much going to put the brakes on them even looking at us for another decade. And then we can start that whole submission process again.
Yes.
Can you tell us a little bit about the school being built in Canton and compared to the high school, please?
Yeah, sorry, I just put a piece of hard candy in my mouth because I'm going to start to cough.
I asked the question.
Yeah. Row. The project in Canton right now is coming in at just shy of $250 million for a building that's roughly accommodating the size of our high school, where we paid under $120 million. So just look at the math here. We're talking 2 to 1. And that's inflation, cost of doing business, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. They passed their project overwhelmingly. So the concern that we have here, and I think this leads to part of why you're asking the question, the concern, if not now, when, and we're just kicking the can for even more expensive project, that cannot be done within the budget. If it could be done within the budget, why aren't there 351 communities doing so? There are none. That's why the debt exclusion was put into place even by the then Mass Taxpayers Association, which was a very conservative group that came out with the Prop 2.5. And they added that language that said for the concept of buildings and so on and so forth, we probably need to think a little differently because they're going to cost a lot of money. But you're right. The cost of doing business just between the time that we opened our high school to them putting a shovel in the ground at some point in the community next to us has doubled the price of the building. That's where we are right now in terms of finances and inflation and so on and so forth. I remember a fire station for $10, $12, $13 million as a town meeting rep, never getting done, and now costing us well over 3 times that. So we know the history of this stuff, that as we don't do them now, the next generation is paying even more. And every generation is going to have senior citizens in it. Every generation is going to have people that's difficult to afford. I get that. But if not now, then when? Because of the cost. To Mr. Fort's comment, to piggyback on your comment, if we don't get this project through, then we are stuck, number one, and we're further stuck on another situation. You're going to need to spend as much as you can up to that levy of the 1/3 cost of the middle school and put capital planning into it to try to make that thing last for another 15 to 20 years. And I don't know how we get 15 to 20 years out of that building without making sure that everything to do with ADA compliance and fire code is updated at the same time. Because as you know, the threshold is the 1/3%, 1/3 of the valuation of the building. That's why at the South School, anything that adds up to $1.36 million roughly automatically kicks into ADA compliance, which in that building means eliminating more spaces because of the way that building was actually built.
And I would just add that the building committee ended with a plea to just get the facts. I keep seeing like the cost of this building doesn't include the site. Yes, the cost of this building includes all the site work plus the main access road and the emergency access and the bridges. That has been the plan since the beginning. That's the facts. So just make sure that you're getting the facts for that. There's so many events going on to various committees, various groups. Thank you to all the groups, organizations, associations who've allowed all of the groups, the PAC, the independent working group, the building committee, school committee, superintendent, anybody to present and answer questions. We had a great discussion at the Jones School last night for the PTO. Thanks for them to organizing that. It's not too late to get a presentation or a Q&A session, but you need to let us know RSVP or ASAP because we are running out of time for that. We'll be at the Hanson School Fair on Saturday, March 29th from 10 to 2. We're looking at hosting some in-person and virtual building office hours, similar to the budget hours where people can pop in and ask questions. I would like to do a couple pop-up events at the school playgrounds. I'm looking at being at the Daw School Playground on Sunday, March 30th, weather permitting. If it's raining, I'll do it on April 6th from 2:30 to 3:30 p.m. at the Gibbons School Playground on April 5th from 9:30 to 10:30 a.m. I'm going to have a book and activities for the kids. My kids will be there playing, so it will be less random person standing there in the playground. I'll be answering questions, showing you where you can find the facts. Committee members, I'll be sending out. You guys are doing all sorts of other things. Please keep working your networks, talking to individuals and groups, making calls, knocking on doors, handing out flyers, holding signs, everything that you're doing for this. At this point, it's all hands on deck, using every strategy, every resource we have. So thank you for your work. Keep doing it. We'll get there. Reminder that town election is April 8th. That's a Tuesday. The ballot will include that question regarding the debt exclusion, not a tax override, to fund the elementary school building project. The town clerk's website has information on voter registration. The deadline is March 29th for that. The deadline for requesting a mail-in ballot is April 1st. There are dates for in-person early voting, including the hours, and the town clerk's website will also tell you where you're going to vote. We've already covered modular classrooms. There's not much more to say, but I do want to remind everyone that no one wants modulars. They're not a great option. But if the new elementary project fails, if that vote fails again, we have no other viable option to address a school that cannot stay open much longer. We've exhaustively studied all possible replacement options, including multiple 300-student options. We've determined that the option that makes the most sense educationally, operationally, and financially is a new consolidated elementary school for 600 students to be built with a multi-million-dollar grant from the MSBA covering a significant amount of cost, and that building should last for 50-plus years. The new consolidated school is the option that allows us to close the South and the Jones and return those properties to the town, to convert the Wilkins into our preschool, and to pare down the district's list of upcoming building projects to that OMS project. and that will allow the municipal government to focus on their own capital projects like the police station. The April 8th vote is not a multiple choice. You're either voting yes to fund a new elementary school and allowing Stoughton to move forward. I think the principal just talked about bringing everything, all the other elementary schools up to a higher level, allowing the town to move forward with the great programs that make Stoughton special, or you're voting no. If you vote no, you leave us with no other choice than to incur a huge expense for a temporary fix that will result in drastic cuts to the school and likely town services as well. So it's a yes or no question. There's no option C, there's no option D. It's yes, this passes, we move forward. No, we move forward, but it brings us down. So I think I'm going to have beaten that to death, but just want to say that. Redistricting update, reminder, redistricting means redrawing the boundary lines for who goes to which elementary school. We're redistricting regardless of the final decision for the South School building due to increased enrollment across the town, and this will affect all elementary schools. We're coming to the redistricting committee update. We met on the 13th of March. Chris, do you want to take the update?
No, I'm sorry, I was not prepared to take the update.
All right. Basically, we looked at where students live in the South District. As Dr. Baeta has pointed out to us, that the students live in that far south corner, which makes redistricting even more complicated. They're not up close to the center of town. They're in this far corner, and eliminating a school from that entire section of town really complicates and creates a lot of long transportation issues for that. So the committee's sort of in a holding pattern until the April 8th vote. I think that was pretty much where we left things. It was a great discussion about kind of looking, what are things we need to look at, what did the committee want to see. The committee wanted to see a lot of the preschool data, and so we could kind of get a better sense of where students are coming in. The next redistricting committee will be April 10th at 6 p.m., at which point we will know more. And now onto the budget. So we are onto the FY26 budget and town meeting articles. We presented to the Finance Committee on March 12th. Our articles, I did not get the vote on our articles. Did our articles pass?
Yes, they
Okay.
move forward, and I believe they're being finalized tomorrow night.
Okay. So our articles passed, but then we come to the FY26 budget. Dr. Baeta, would you like to take the lead?
Yeah, I appreciate and the time, if you will, and I'll make it quick because I know that it's getting late, but we had a lot of, as you know, deadlines that we have to meet under the town charter, which we did as a 3.8% budget. We did that by December 31st. We also commented on that day that we would be relooking at the SOA once it was out, which it came out January 25th. You voted right away to increase that, which made the budget 68,076,863, about an 8.3% increase over prior year. And then the work of trying to find a balanced budget started to come into play, and you'll see that in the third bullet, which is really came from discussions of the Finance Committee Chair, Mr. Anopian, reaching out to Mr. Coulter, Mr. Azzavino, who used to be on the committee, and myself, and we met, had a discussion about literally taking the entire revenue that's coming into the town minus expenses that needed to come off right away versus basically the comment that has happened over and over, which was, whatever's left, quote unquote, what the school department would be able to take that up. So that brings you to the $7,256,250 number, which is a 6.98% increase, just under 7%, which still means we have to make some restructuring of our budget, but we're no longer talking about those double-digit numbers of layoffs and hitting classrooms and all that. We'll come up with a scenario for the committee to look at these options as we get closer and closer to town meeting and really know that these are solidified numbers, which, like I said, I expect to be finalized tomorrow night or thereabouts. I think it's really important that we also recognize that the community has taken a very aggressive and long-term appropriate of not using free cash as part of operational budgets, but has at the same time, within the significant number of free cash that's available this year, over $12 million, put funding into areas that do have direct benefits to the school department, i.e. capital. It looks like our capital for over $700,000 will be approved. Second, looks like some money going into the specialization account at a special town meeting, just under about $286,000, if I remember correctly, is the number that's been put forward. Third, adding to the stabilization fund. Fourth, OPEB, which is a liability to the town. Fifth, the building committee line item of about $3 million being added. And then I believe two separate votes. One is an article for about $1.4 million in capital for the purposes of the South School, and then another resolution just recently passed, I believe, for another $2 million, which would bring the cost of the South School project by the time we went to build it to the taxpayers to probably closer to $60 million instead of 64, 65. And again, what the bids are going to be. So this is the time of the year where the biggest budget, us, and the town budget, we all come together and say, this is what we have. We don't have any more than this. And so we share the wealth to make sure that everybody's getting a piece of the pie, but recognizing that in our particular case, our line items are always much more fluid. Our budget is much more fluid than municipal budgets are, although theirs are becoming more and more fluid in the last few years as well, because of things like, recently we just had water main breaks, I believe 2 or 3 in the same week. That it doesn't cost $1 to do that. You're talking hundreds of thousands of dollars just to repair and millions of dollars to actually fix the problem long-term, which I believe there's some funds in part of the phase 6, I think it's called, in that as well. So that's the recommended budget for the school department at this time, the budget that goes forward, pending any other changes. House 2 is not out yet. House 1, the governor's budget is. We know what that number looks like. We're getting a little less than that as part of, this is the money that's available. But if House 2 comes in at $100 more a student, or $150 more a student, or $2 more a student, the committee, I believe, has a continued responsibility to look at the best way to say, where do those funds go, where should they go? And ideas would be to look at a fall town meeting and say, we have a couple expenses that have come up that we don't know about, that this will take care of. Or the one-time purchases, let's say software, curriculum, any of those things, we would not be adding people in October and November, except for maybe in the rare cases of increased special education and all that. And then also looking at stabilization. In other words, we will have over $500,000 if the town meeting votes the additional stabilization, sped stabilization number. Do we continue to grow that number? And I will tell you that's a number that we should get very close to $1 million over the next few years if we can, because of some of these expenses that are taking place that are unknown to us and happen after our budgets come through the process. So those are roads that the committee will be able to take once it has further factual information and decides what's in the best interest of Stoughton Public Schools and long-term planning of either one-time expenses or stabilization or whatever the needs may be. I hope that kind of gives you the gentle picture of where we are.
Thank you. I think the main thing we need to do tonight is to vote that new bottom line, the $67,256,250. And prepare for town meeting. We need to have that line item budget before town meeting so that we can see exactly where everything falls. Any questions or comments before we move forward? Karen?
The last budget that we voted through, I don't have that paperwork, but what did you say? We voted a new one after.
$68,076,863.
Say it again?
$68,076,863. That was the SOA.
That was what we voted on.
8.3%, yeah.
And we voted on a budget.
You don't. So in general, what's happening now is there isn't $68 million available to the schools.
Even with the additional House
Correct.
1?
Correct.
Okay. So how did we get to the new number, 60?
The new number,
Is
yeah,
that something that the budget working group did?
no. That
That's
came,
not what the budget working group did. All right.
No.
How did that number come out?
that number came through the chair of the finance committee, looking at all of the expenses for all line items and all
Of the
of
school committee?
of the school. He took a one page of all the revenue, took out all the shared costs, healthcare and all that, took all of the expense lines and basically said, in order for us to have a balanced budget, the schools get this, the town has that, which for us is just more money added, because the town is staying at its 3.8% number. It's actually, I think, 3.9%.
Well, it's not the 68 that we voted for, it's $800,000 less. And that was done, I mean, you sent us an email, and at the meeting, I think you had said it was the chair of FinCom?
Chair of FinCom, the town manager, myself, and the chair of FinCom at that point used the former vice chair, John Anzavino, to double-check his math. That then went to Heidi, representing the school department, and Biz, representing the town, to say, do these numbers equal the total amount of revenue available to the town of Stoughton? Yes or no, of which they both concurred that it did.
I'm sorry. So it was you, the superintendent.
Correct.
It was
The chair of the finance committee,
of finance,
the town manager,
Tom Coulter, the town manager.
yep,
Okay, and who else?
John Anzavino, who was a
Who is John Anzavino?
former member of FinCom and a town meeting member.
He's a town meeting rep?
Yes.
He's just a town meeting rep.
And-
So you four got together, and you went through the school's budget and came up with a lower budget than what we voted on before?
No. We received from the chair of the finance committee, this is your revenue. This is the only way that this can be done without having a Proposition 2.5 override or by cutting budgets, is of the $2.8 million in SOA, $2 million are going to the school department. 800 had already been accounted for as part of the 103% presented by the town side, not 100%, 103%, they had added the 3%. So these are the available funds that are available to the school department.
I think one of the key things that was not clear is that we had understood that town had calculated the 3.8% with 100% of our SOA, so exactly the same amount of SOA funding as we had last year. They had calculated it with 103%, so they had a 3% increase that they accounted for. That's about the 800,000 difference. So we had assumed, when we had voted on January 28th, the information we had is that the calculation of the 3.8 had been with 100% and not the 103%. That we didn't realize that 800,000 had already been accounted for in the 3.8 that we used to calculate the budget in December.
I think I just really don't understand is why wasn't one of the budget working group people, why wasn't a school committee member in there with you guys? With the superintendent, the town manager, chair of FinCom, and a resident, the town meeting rep?
And there was no select board meeting or school committee member involved. That's correct. I was asked to attend a meeting on Friday before the Saturday by the chair of the FinCom, who said, this is what we have for revenue. I want to share it with you folks. I've had it double checked by the former assistant finance committee member, John Anzavino. We met, we were presented a one-pager of all the revenue, all the expenses, and this is how we get to a balanced budget, which is what FinCom has to recommend to town meeting.
And no school committee member was invited to the meeting?
No.
But isn't that one of our things that we do? We do superintendent budget and policy.
And you also get told at town meeting what your final number is.
Yeah.
And to go to town, you can do two things tonight. You can vote the budget as is. You can vote no. If you vote no, we don't have a balanced budget. You're going to have a resolution on the town meeting floor make cuts to other departments on the municipal side to get your $800,000. That's the only option that you have. Because the revenue isn't there. We're not using any free cash. Remember, we've always used free cash. We're not using any free cash. So there is no free cash option. Again, unless you can put a motion on the town meeting floor and get it supported.
So, Dr. Baida, I wanted to say I appreciate you having that meeting. I think one thing that's been consistent about our budget process this year is that we have adapted and stayed responsive to new information as it's become available. I think that's something we were really specific about in December. When we had to vote to meet the deadline in the charter, we acted based on the information that we had available, even though we did not like those numbers. And then once we had new House 1 numbers with Chapter 70 projections, we updated to incorporate that. It turns out the town calculated Chapter 70 increases differently than what was communicated to us, so we have to make an adjustment now. So I think this is consistent with how we've acted so far this budget season, staying responsive to new information as we get it. And like you said, Dr. Baida, I would expect that that remains the same as we get more information in the fall about House 2 and where the budget numbers land, so that we can stay responsive. And because at the end of the day, Chapter 70 money is allocated to districts based on student need. So that is really important. And also having a balanced budget and behaving or putting forth a budget that is going to meet the needs of students and also work within the funds that we have available to us is just sort of what we need to do.
Yeah, a couple of things. I think at one point, the best budget that we had was 3.8 to 5.5%. I remember that number being discussed in a public meeting, that the best we could potentially see is 5.5%, and that was using free cash. When the SOA money came in, it's basically, of the available SOA money, this is how we get to a balanced budget. I was asked to attend a meeting by the chair of the FinCom. I did that. They clearly articulated, this is the revenue. Again, the committee can do whatever it chooses to do. It can vote no and not accept the recommendation. If you're doing that, you need to go to FinCom tomorrow night and tell them that, and tell them that you're not going to accept the balanced budget, which will mean they will have to cut elsewhere the difference of the SOA. And don't forget that last Wednesday night, 3 hours, at FinCom, Lindsay and I had to listen to cutting our budget below foundation, of which that was voted. If you see the vote on the 67 million, it's 9 to 5 to 1 in favor, with the abstention being our employee, who always takes the high road and ethically votes to abstain. But there was 5 very clear votes against our budgeting even getting this number.
Can I just add to that? I think there are folks on the Finance Committee, as we saw, who don't totally understand how foundation budget works and what the state requirements are and what our minimum requirements that we must spend are. That was clear. And also there are folks on the Finance Committee and who have served on the Finance Committee in the past who have a lot of experience with these numbers. And those are the folks who were in that meeting with Dr. Baida this past weekend. And they are the ones who understand the ins and outs of how this works and what we need to be considering. So I trust that the folks in that meeting understood what they were talking about, understood the numbers they are working with, and put forth a recommendation that is responsible.
Armando?
We did move, given new information, but we're still at a point where we're guessing and waiting for new information. With the House too, what if we get a surprise and we get substantially less than we expect, given the Department of Education is going away and Massachusetts might decide we can't do this anymore, or someone, what do we do then?
You have 2 roads there. Like I said earlier, the first road is, depending on when you get that information, you could make an argument on town meeting floor that you're using House 2 now and not House 1. You could do that. That's typically not done, and I'll tell you why. House 1 is usually the minimum. House 2 could slide back to House 1 or actually even exceed what House 2 is saying. So typically, House 2 numbers don't get used until a fall town meeting, once the state budget is completely done. And the reason is, it's the horse trading that takes place in House 2. The House and the Senate have to put together a working committee, three from each branch. They come together and they basically say, this number is too high, this number is too low. There's all kinds of special projects that are turned into the line items. And so House 2, typically, it's currently set at $75 per student in House 1. Last year was $104 per student. If we went from 75 to 104, we're going to get in the vicinity of about another $120,000. Last year, if you remember, House 1, $183,000 was left on the table. We didn't take it. House 2 took it from $30 a student to $104, which for us was an actual $32,000 more, which we also didn't take. We left about $210,000 to $15,000 in SOA money in the town coffers. We didn't go after it. That's what we did last year. So yes, there's a potential for more. If you remember, House 1 was used a few years ago, and it was a significant increase from the expense lines that we had. And that was the year that we had the healthcare situation where the schools basically said, we got to help to fix this problem, and we're really not going to expend all of the SOA because it would be financially probably not needed at that time. I'll use that phrase.
Another question. Going forward, how can we prevent this? I mean, it seems...
Only one way.
What is that way?
Change the charter.
Catherine, is it possible to potentially create a committee to talk to the, I think we have a charter subcommittee?
We do have a charter committee. I have talked very briefly with the chairperson of that committee, who is open to hearing the request. The recommendation that I got from the chairperson was that this would be more successful and a stronger petition if we have the town on board. If we go paired with the select board and say, we do this every year, this is ridiculous, can we just change it to January 31st? And if we have worked out how that would work, could show the timelines would work, that would make this so much stronger. But I can reach out to the chairperson again and ask about the process.
Yeah, it impacts us, it seems that it impacts us substantially more than the town side. And if that's the case, the town may not have an incentive to move forward. So is it even possible for, of course, we should always partner with the town if we can, but if we cannot, how do we still move forward? I just don't like to vote for a budget, then vote for another one, then vote for another one. I like to do it once and be done. And so the population, the taxpayers know exactly where we are and not have to tune in every single time to determine which budget we're voting for next.
So that, like I said earlier, I think there's only one way, and that is to change a charter, and there's a number of different ways of changing a charter, of which one of them is a town meeting agreeing to the charter change, and then actually, if I remember correctly, the charter needs to be taken as part of a ballot question, that it would be changed. It's a two-step process. That can be done a number of different ways. It could be a working committee, like you just said, of elected and appointed and interested folks. I can tell you right now that on July 1st, 2026, I have all intentions as a citizen of this town to do everything in my body to move this date, because I believe it causes the politics of ridiculousness in this town.
Yes.
And I'm not blaming, I'm not pointing. I'm telling you what I've lived through as a school committee member and now as the superintendent in the last few years here. It's trying to create things without having the numbers. And it was used against us the other day at FinCom, where, quote, you voted for a budget that's less than foundation. I didn't know what foundation was going to be until January 25th. So I can't give you a number. I'm outrageously telling, well, I think foundation's going to be $6 million more, so let's go with that. No, you have to wait for that, and that's why I think it's important. Now, I spent 10 years in another district. We never did anything until the foundation budget came out.
Yeah.
I was working with the committee on a budget, but it was literally a working group. We never held meetings until end of January, February. My budgets weren't due until March.
Yeah.
Now here, I think you probably could say January 31st, because we'd have good numbers by then. No, it's really, really important to recognize something. We are doing nothing new except keeping what we have for the second consecutive year.
More than that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so therefore, if there isn't any money, there isn't any money. And to be quite honest, we've had this discussion before. This budget, I believe, is a reasonable budget, and we're also seeking a brand-new building in the next 2 weeks. So we're playing as nice as we can in the sandbox. That's one. Two, the process within budgets, that the budget that you receive is the superintendent's recommendation. That's what it's called. It's the superintendent's recommendation, and then literally the process, it becomes your budget. And there are different processes on how you get to that budget. I've never seen a budget not be voted multiple times by a school committee. At least twice. You vote it once, you get new numbers, you vote it again, then town meeting is over, and you vote it a third time. Because town meeting is the last body that can make any changes to into your budget until it's actually passed. That's why they hold it every year, if that makes sense. I don't know if it does.
Yeah, it does, but it's still, it's been going on for far too many years, and I think, Madam Chair, if you can, or us, we can ask Dr. Byetta a new task to talk to the town side to figure out if they're interested in helping us change it. And
I know
let's
they
change
are.
it while you're still superintendent.
It takes a little longer than a year to go through a charter review process, but
You can continue after that.
I'm happy to be a volunteer for the school committee at that time. It's mind-boggling to me that we do it this way.
It's my understanding that this is an outlier in the state. Is very unusual, very unusual. When I talk to colleagues who are on school committees in other towns, I ask them when their budget is due. Someone told me May is when their budget is due to the town, because they get their numbers. They then go into committee, come up with a draft budget in March, and then they start collaborating with the town and get to a final number. So, I mean, right now, the way the charter is set up, it incentivizes guesswork.
Yeah.
And it does not incentivize collaboration.
I agree. The most frustrating thing with the school committee, for me, I can only speak for myself, is doing the budget process where we're pretty much guessing. And it'd be wonderful to just fix the problem once and for all, and not let it on for the next 10 years or the next 12 years. And providing that collaboration with the town would be wonderful for everyone, the schools, the children, the taxpayer, and the town, and us, and everything else. So I think we should just move forward and fix it however we can, or at least make a best effort to fix it.
So that's the future thing, but we still have to address this year's budget, which is unfortunate. We still have to play with all of the variables, and so we do have this dilemma. Do we vote this new budget and move forward with what we know can be funded at this time, or do we stick with the budget that we voted in January and move forward to FinCom tomorrow?
I'd like to say something else.
Sure, Karen.
So it's wonderful to hope that we can, and even work towards some different date that we can get this to the town, but that doesn't change what's happening right now. And right now, there's a possibility that we voted a budget. We had a working group that worked on a budget. Now we have new numbers. Now the superintendent and whoever went and they talked about it and they come up with a new number. And now I believe it's going to happen again, that House 2 will come out and there'll be maybe more money given for, is this Chapter 70 SOA? So Chapter 70 SOA, I think you have a piece of paper that I received once, allotted to schools based on rising student population, low-income English learners, and special education. That's what Chapter 70 SOA is. Money allotted for schools for rising student population, low-income English learners and special that's what it's for. Okay, so that's what SOA Chapter 70 is for. We have House 2 that's going to come out, potentially. There could stay the same, could be more. So the question I have is, how does the school committee get a seat at the table with you, FinCom, the resident or the town meeting rep, and the town manager? How do we get a seat at that table to talk about our budget if
So-
this comes out more? If it doesn't come out more, then I guess whatever we vote tonight
Well,
stands.
Right. So a couple of things. Last Wednesday, regardless if I had met with anybody, you would have been told a number. Period, end of story. You can call anybody, that's what would have happened last Wednesday. Because the chair of the finance committee's sole responsibility to the FinCom is to vote a balanced budget to town meeting. And he took all of the revenue, all of the expenses, and he said, and he would have said, and I won't speak for him, this is what's available to the school department. And that would have been the vote. Because that's what happened on Wednesday night at that meeting, is everybody else saw the sheet of the expenses and said, this would be this new school budget. That's the process. You would have been told, regardless if I met that Saturday, I would have gone into the meeting last Wednesday, I would have been saying, we need 68 million. They would have said, you don't have 68 million, you're getting this number. Because that's how we can balance the budget. And then the committee can take that number, which is going to be voted by FinCom, go to town meeting and say, we don't agree, we need to move money from the following line items, because you cannot add to a budget without taking it from another budget, or from stabilization accounts and move it over. That's the process that we use. That's not my process, that's the process that you use here, which has happened in the past.
So if I'm understanding, when House 2 comes out, if we get, I think you had made like maybe $2 more student, then this is going to happen again.
My recommendation with House 2, because House 2 is the House proposing their budget, and then the Senate comes in, and they don't always consistently are one is more than the other, is to stick with this budget, and then when House 2 comes about, go after that in the fall town meeting.
Correct.
And say, this was this is the Chapter 70 money for special education, for high needs, for low income, for ELL students, and we need it for these things that we cut from this budget when we went from 68 to 67.
The same exact process that Joe and the FinCom, this
No,
is the same process again that we will do?
No, the process will change, and I'll tell you why. Once House 2 is horse trading. Think about it. You're a senator and I'm a representative, and the number that comes out is $2 more per kid, and we just can't come to an agreement. So 3 senators and 3 representatives get together, they close the door, and they figure out what's the happy medium. You know what, we're not going to increase it at all, or we're going to do the $2. That money will not become available at all and is never used because it goes up and potentially goes up and down. It's always up from House 1. In 20 years that I've been involved, it's always up from House 1. That number becomes certified once the state budget's done. We won't see that new number until the fall. Usually it's July or August that they close out the budget. Then there'll be a call, more than likely, for a town meeting in the fall. There will be new revenue that comes out, whatever that may be, including potential new certified free cash, potentially. And somebody will call for a warrant, and they'll open the warrant. We'll know at that time, as a school committee and superintendent and the town coffers, everybody will know, did we get a couple more dollars or not? And if we did, what do you think should be, you meaning school committee, thinks we should do with that money? And I give you options. Last year, we did not go after the money. It was 31,000 and change more. We didn't go after it. We didn't think it was something to go after.
A few years prior, we did go out. There's 1.9 million,
Yeah.
Lindsay, remind me?
Yeah.
And we went after the vestibules, and we went after security, and we did a whole bunch of projects with that. So
Correct.
it could be 31,000, it could be 1.9 million, it could be $35. So, but that, at that point, it's, we're driving the bus on that.
Okay, so my understanding is that when it does come out, this is money that's allotted to schools
Yes.
based on population, low income. This is, so the fact that 31,000 last year was money that was supposed to go to students and low income and all of this, we just chose not to. I don't.
There are communities, so currently, our select board and the practice of the town has been that when Chapter 70 comes in, it literally, quote, goes through the general fund and to the school department. There's a town next door that's not the way it happens. So the same money you're noting, the allocation is for the four groups you just mentioned. That town's fathers have, and mothers have decided that, nope, that's not the way it works here. It goes into the general fund, and then you have to make an argument for why you need it, and we decide if you're going to get it or not. Same form of government, two different roads. We've had a commitment so far in the year and a half I've been here, and I believe prior, and Jonathan, you could speak to this, where the Chapter 70 money in general goes to the school department. Am I wrong?
Is that in writing?
No.
So it's varied over the years. If we go all the way back, it was always a 2/3, 1/3.
Yeah, 2/3, that's when I was on the school committee, 2/3, 1/3.
And then
Yep.
we saw migration, particularly when we saw the spikes in funding, and we saw the huge change in demographic within the district, and we saw student needs spike, and we started seeing a realization of all the funds, which I thought was tremendous on the part of the town, so.
And part of that is because of the 7-year Student Opportunity Act, which was geared to all communities, but about 160 of us included, where there's this belief that Chapter 70 wasn't giving the town of Stoughton enough based on its demographics and all of its changes. And the SOA, which was actually put forward predominantly for the large urban districts, if you remember the original regulations, and now it's actually impacted a number of other districts who, especially if they have increased enrollment and demographic changes.
But I could also add something else in. There's difference in the money we receive through Chapter 70, particularly with the SOA now, is we weren't just given the money as a blank check, as a simple addition to Chapter 70. We actually had to notify the state on how we were going to spend those funds. And there's an accountability process for the state to determine if we actually spent the funds where we said we were going to. So in the past, if say, the SOA rolled in and we did a 2/3, 1/3, whatever formula, we actually would put ourselves at a disadvantage in terms of being able to meet our requirements. Say we couldn't actually meet them. And then we'd come under scrutiny in the fact that we hadn't spent the money that was allocated for a specific purpose as we were supposed to, which could in fact in the future jeopardize continued funding. So that additional funding we're seeing now, there are some strings attached to their expectations from the state, and we need to actually spend it for what it was allocated for.
Does that help a little bit, Karen? It's still, there's a lot.
There's a lot, you know, I'm not sure if I agree that there shouldn't be a school committee member when there's a discussion about school committee or school budget.
So we do have to decide or move forward with a plan. I'm open to hearing suggestions from the committee.
Yeah, I think, Karen, I hear your feedback about like wanting school committee folks in the room, and I think part of our job as school committee members is to trust the recommendations of experts at times, and I think this is what we have before us. So with that in mind, I'd like to make a motion to amend the bottom line of the FY26 Stoughton Public Schools budget to $67,256,250. Accepting feedback on the motion from Dr. Baeta. Does that do what we need it to?
Yes.
Okay.
So we have a motion on the table. Do I have a second?
Second.
All right, a second from Karen. Do I have an alternate motion? Open it up for questions, discussion. All right, all in favor? Sorry. Sorry.
Aye.
Aye, sorry.
Aye, all right.
Distracted by shiny
Madam Chair, if I may. To Ms. Power's comments, I will absolutely make sure that the committee, because you feel so strongly, I will make sure that before I am asked to go into a meeting, that I at least communicate with the chair and the vice chair and say, I've been asked to come to this meeting, nobody else unelected is coming to that meeting, should I go and gather? I came back with a number that was going to be given to me that Wednesday night. I didn't sit there and horse trade. I was given a number based on revenue and expenses and said, this is what's going to happen, and we need to make sure that at least we have some collaboration, that this is okay. That's what I did. But I'll add your request. Okay.
All right. Well, that's it for now for the budget. It's to be continued.
Thank you for
The never-ending thing. All right, the next item on the agenda is the superintendent evaluation. I'm just going to make this very quick. We're in the summative evaluation phase of the superintendent, and that's a process that's going to continue through June. At our previous meeting, Dr. Beta gave us an update on his report. The two members whose terms are ending need to provide their evaluations before they leave. So Lindsay and I are going to submit our evaluations to me, the chair. I will just put them together, and they will be passed on to the next chair or to the appointee who's going to be leading the process to compile with the other member evaluation. Let's set a deadline of April 1st, just to get it done. Is that good, or do you?
I can do that. I can do that.
All right, we're gonna force, we'll both do that. So that is our goal. So more homework for us. The rest of you, start to gather your thoughts, read through the materials, see what questions you have for Dr. Beta. And the MAC is always very helpful with this process if you need help or additional help as you're working through that. The next item is the policy review. We have, the policy working group brought forward 4 policies for consideration and for discussion this meeting. And if we're ready, we can vote on them, but first discussion. So I'd like to turn it over to Karen and Chris and Jonathan.
Karen, you want to read this?
John, why don't you, you're always good at it.
So there's 4 policies on the table. There's 4 policies on the table this evening, starting off with the IE Organization of Instruction. This policy is here because throughout our process, we've been seeing MASC make recommendations. This is a trend we've seen with MASC. They've been working to do 2 things, remove unnecessary policies. And they've also been working to remove some antiquated policies, which has some very specific language that almost read like procedures. And policy IE would be an example of a policy they see as being redundant and unnecessary within the school committee's policy manual. Because either it's accepted practice, it's something that's covered by a regulation, there's case law or something else that establishes the specific components of this. And they feel it's unnecessary, and when we met, we came to the same determination. So we would recommend that this policy, in fact, be removed from the school committee policy manual because it's unnecessary.
All right. Any questions on this one before we move on? So this one would be a separate vote just to remove it?
Yeah, just
There's
voting
not
remove.
going to be a replacement for it, or?
Nope.
Okay. All right. Moving on.
So now we have 2 related policies, IMG and IMGA. And this is an example of the restructuring to existing policies and really cleaning them up, moving some things around and removing a lot of prescriptive and very specific language to make it more general, and to really give your principals, in the case of these policies, more latitude to implement these. And these are also policies that are driven by federal agencies and also by case law. And it allows principals to be more adaptive when dealing with the specific things that fall into these policies. So when you look at IMG, basically they struck the animals prohibited in school component from the policy. And then what they did is they moved it to IMGA, where, and when we gave you the policies, we struck out for IMG to show you what was removed. And then we actually gave you 2 clean policies for IMGA, so you can see the existing policy and then the proposed policy. And when you embed that additional language, it would actually create a huge policy. And you see them actually going back in the proposed policy, which was provided by MASC. Just a very streamlined policy that isn't so prescriptive and really does give the principals who will be implementing this policy some latitude in figuring out how it works within their buildings. And this policy is something we had an attorney come in a couple years ago and actually provide a training at our retreat when some additional language came down from the federal government, and there were some court court outcomes where there are some recommendations and some requirements that went along with it. So,
Any questions or comments on IMG and IMGA?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was just wondering if it, IMG, when it deals IMA and IMG because it deals with animals in the school. I was just wondering if it's worth having those policies go by the medical team's desk just to take a quick look, given that there are existing policies, best practices.
so these would have already gone through that review at MASC. So I mean, we can table and we can put it out if you like, but that component takes place through the process before they're provided to us for review. So they have a whole team and they look at all those different components for us. And they also have legal counsel go through it as well. So it's really what we're doing. All this has already been proved. We're just seeing how it fits here. If you'd like to go through that component, we can do it as well.
No,
Or we can
I'm
simply
looking
move
for
it
your
forward.
advice on this, I guess. It's just that when I did a little bit of research determining what policies are for allergies at one time, and it was clearly determined that they're all over the place, different schools. So I thought if I were to see if it matches what our existing policy is or not.
So I can give you a scenario with this. We can adopt this policy. I can guarantee this policy will be reviewed by our health services people. If there's an issue with it, I can also tell you definitively, they will let us know. And we can simply bring it back for a quick revision. So we can go either route, whatever works best for you.
Amanda, just so that you know, when I was also doing this with Chris and John, we did see in their wording that came from the National Institute of Health. So a lot of so they actually have already looked into all of this. The wording of IMG and IMGA basically just kind of split it. Most of it was just a reorganization of the old IMG, except that they took out the service animals, and they put that into a separate one. And most of the National Institute of Health information stayed inside the policy. So
So it's covered.
again, I think it's covered. We went over this because Chris had a lot of your same.
Oh, really?
Yes, yes, she did. And so, yeah, so we all went back and we looked, and there used to be a brochure from the National Institute of Health, and a lot of the wordage from that brochure actually found its way into the policy.
No, that's great. I think everyone in this committee is very thorough, so.
Well, and I'd like to say with this particular policy working group, when you see a citation or you see a legal reference, you can rest assured they've actually been looked up, and there's something that's been discussed. It is not just what they are, but how they're embedded within the policy. And, I mean, it's just, you've done a remarkably thorough job before bringing these forward to the committee.
I'd like
Thank
to
you.
add that I believe that there is language in there that addresses the issue of allergies, and that is paramount. Student health is paramount to having animals or service animals. But the new language gives the building principal the latitude that if allergies are really severe and it is a service animal that has been proven necessary for an accommodation, that they can figure out an alternative arrangement to best accommodate the one student while addressing the allergies of the other. So that is something that is addressed in the policy, I believe. So it's a good question, though. But to John's point, we control this. So, if you want us to go through another layer of review, we're at a place where we feel comfortable bringing it forward for your consideration. If for your peace of mind, having Danielle review it, for example, I have no problem with that.
No, we can go forward here, and I guess we can just put it on her desk just to
Okay.
make sure she's read it at one point, she reads it at one point or another.
Yeah, when these shoes were switched, and you're on the policy committee, I didn't stop from hammering all sorts of questions at you guys about the policies. So I can take it too. But if you have a question, you know, my feelings aren't going to be hurt. I'm happy to have, I'd rather have a policy that we all can support and feel comfortable with than pushing something through. I don't think anyone's in
No one
favor of
wants
that.
to push things through, just for the sake of pushing it through, absolutely.
I'm good.
Okay.
Okay.
All right.
Any other questions or comments? All right, the last one is IMA.
So this,
I'm a what?
so this is another example of the trend we're seeing that I talked about earlier, where MAC is cleaning up their policy manual. So this was a policy that was recommended for removal as being redundant and unnecessary. But when we looked at it, some of the committee members felt like it's still a nice piece to have in place because it does set a specific expectation that's available to people that might be looking through the policy manual and understanding, you know, specific things that we do, or, you know, it's just a nice piece to have within the manual. But we also talked about a change in our process so that we were actually noting with the policies when they're reviewed, as opposed to our past practice, which everything just stays static, and there's no annotation on the policy itself that it was reviewed unless there's a change made or it's adopted. So in bringing this particular policy forward for discussion, this policy was something that had been identified as being redundant. The committee members felt like they'd like to keep it, which we absolutely can do. If we keep this policy, what I've added is a reviewed tag at the bottom. So we'll just put the date it was reviewed. So you'll start seeing this creep into the policy manual when we do the overall review. Because not all the policies that we review make it to the committee, or they haven't in the past. This would just slightly change the process so this starts creeping in the manual. So if you look at a policy without a review date, in the past, you wouldn't know if it had been reviewed or not. This will start just cataloging that piece and noting it on the policy so future committees know that it wasn't simply a new policy put in when the policy manual came online. It's actually something that reviewed and was sustained as written.
Thank you. So we don't, if we decide to keep it as is, we don't have to do anything. There's just basically.
So I would just say,
to vote.
I'd say we still vote it because
Okay.
we're changing the policy by
So
adding
they
the
didn't
fact that it
review
was
it.
reviewed.
Okay, that was my question.
So we're just going to vote to keep it as is.
Okay.
What's this committee's recommendation?
So Karen and I both firmly believe of keeping a record or a trail of every time a policy is even reviewed or looked at. We did see that. Karen did some fabulous research and saw that in other districts, and we thought that was a best practice. So it's something we want to adopt. So we're going to start adopting it now. So that even if it's not changed, which means it's got a new effective date on it, we still have a review date on it so that folks know the last time that this was looked at for future school committee members, because we thought that would be very helpful. But it means that we're going to have a bunch of policies that aren't going to have any of that information on it. So we're going to start putting it in from here on. Karen, anything you'd like to add?
Perfectly, I couldn't answer it.
All right. Any further questions or comments? All right, so we almost have like a three-part vote, right? We have one we recommend for removal, we have two that have been substantially changed, and one that we're keeping but adding an addendum. Does that make sense, Jonathan, or do you want to, do we
No,
vote
that's-
IMA with
Yeah,
I?
we're removing, we're modifying, and we're voting to sustain this policy as is with a review date on it.
Okay. I did not put myself enough motion, thanks, on my notes. All right. So do I have, do we want to vote? Is there any ones that people would like to table? Let me start with that. Are we okay moving forward to vote these? Getting them done. All right. So do I have a motion to remove policy IE?
Motion to remove policy IE.
All right. That was made by Karen and seconded by Chris. Any questions, comments? All in favor?
Aye.
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 All right, so 5-0 on that one. So a motion to amend IMG and IMGA.
So moved.
Is that correct? Okay. All right, so that was made by Chris
Second.
and seconded by Karen. All in favor?
Aye.
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 All right, that's 5-0. And then the last one, motion to sustain IMA with the addition of the review tag.
So moved.
All right,
Second.
all right. So that was first by Karen, second by Chris. All in favor?
Aye.
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 All right, 5-0. You just wanted to have a votorama for me. All right, moving on, we're almost done. Acceptance of minutes from March 4th, 2025. Any amendments for the March 4th, 2025 minutes?
Surprisingly, no. No extra spaces either. That's not true, there are extra spaces.
On the third sentence down, there's two abouts. Did you miss the two
Uh-oh.
abouts, Chris?
Oh, on page 2, where's that one?
On
Did
page
miss
1?
it. What
Oh, on
is
page
it?
1? Oh, no.
I did miss it.
So just that,
Was it a space?
No, there are extra spaces. in there.
no. What was that, Armando?
Not having
Oh.
any spaces.
Am I looking at the?
Oh, wrong one. That's the
Executive
executive session.
session.
Wrong one. Yeah, so I have a couple of minutes for that one. All right, so
Oh, you caught it then.
motion to approve March 4th, 2025 minutes as is.
So moved.
All right, made by Chris, second.
Second.
Second by Karen. It's been moved and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
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 All right, 5-0. Sorry, Chris. Almost done. SEOC expansion proposal, that's the Stoughton Equal Opportunity Committee expansion proposal. We had the revised proposals submitted last time from Select Board Member Deborah Roberts. I asked for committee feedback. I did have a couple answers from Ms. Roberts regarding the decision to have 5 members from the Select Board and 4 from the school committee. There were 3 reasons for that. The first was that the thought that having an odd number of members makes it easier for voting and decision-making reasons. You are less likely to have that deadlock of 5 and 5. Secondly, the SEOC was founded by the select board, and they currently have 5 members. And the third was concern about the total number of members. So those were her reasons given for that. Chris, you weren't here last time, but I went to the meeting, and the SEOC assured me they see themselves solely as advisories, more of a think tank. They don't intend to be watchdogs. And if they have any, they don't intend to have expenses in the first year, and if they do have things not covered by the grant, it's a town committee, so it would fall under select board rather than school committee budget. Yes. So I wanted to ask if there are any other questions or that. We do need to kind of decide what we're going to do with this. Are we simply going to let it exist? It is moving forward through town meeting. We can offer a vote of support. We could write a letter of support. You know, I'm open to suggestions. I know Select Board Member Roberts would love to have us have a vote of support and to co-present with her, but I'm open to what the committee feels comfortable with at this point. And again, this is moving forward. We've had a chance to review. I think we still have some opportunity to amend or ask questions if we would so choose to. Lindsay?
I think I just want to say I really have appreciated Select Board Member Roberts' responsiveness to feedback through this process and patience with folks taking their time and immersing themselves and really understanding the ins and outs and asking questions. So I think that is just like a really positive collaborative tone to be using in our work with the folks on the municipal team. So really just want to appreciate that. And also not to bury the lead, I'd like to make a motion to support the Stoughton Equal Opportunity Committee expansion proposal and to continue to collaborate with the select board member advancing this work.
All right, so we have a motion on the table. Do I have a second for this?
Second.
A second by Armando. Do I have any other motions on the table?
Yes.
Chris, yes.
I would like to propose that we support the Stoughton Equal Opportunity Committee and continue to work with the Select Board member on modifying the language of the bylaw prior to town meeting presentation.
Okay.
Do you mind if I ask Chris what sort of modifications you're continuing to look for?
Two that are, I'm trying to make this as reader-friendly as possible. There are two bullets that just need an overhaul in terms of language placed out of order. That doesn't mirror the rest of the language. But I did have two questions. One, in this iteration, one is the last sentence of the first paragraph on page 3 that starts, "The Select Board may request that the SEOC provide specific recommendations on topics within the purview of the board." I would like to have that same sentence for the school committee, because I think that formalizes the advisory role of the SEOC for the school committee, especially if there are school committee appointees on it.
Makes sense.
Once again, this is not deal-breaking language, but clarification that I think will be helpful going forward. And then the bullet following that, where it talks about submitting, she says a written report. I would take the word report out, just a written summary of activities, but wanted to know about the timing of that and really wanted to put that in there because that timing could be very strategic and intentional. So I would just make those two recommendations.
So,
Thank you for asking.
yeah, no, so just so I'm clear, your motion is to support the proposal and continue to work on modifications.
Yes.
Okay, so I will
Okay.
rescind my motion
Okay.
and second Chris's motion.
How do we do that? I should know by now. If somebody takes it off the table, it just goes off the table. Is that correct? I think so. Okay, all right, so Lindsay.
Poor
little
Amanda's
card
left
with me.
hanging there, like, I'm a second with no motion.
All right, so Lindy.
Chris, how
Lindsay.
does that actually work, though? That we ask them to allow us to continue to make recommended changes to what, and they either do or they don't?
Right. Yep, the worst I can do is say no.
So I think what Chris is saying is that we support the idea of it. We just have the language that we're looking to change is not substantial. We're not looking to change the substantial
Right,
outcome of that.
correct.
Okay.
Or the duties of this body
Right.
or anything, just some clarifying language.
Okay.
I still have a number of reservations for still the 5 to 4. It's still, the language to me sounds a lot more watchdogish than advisory. So for me, I'd like to see some changes on that. Don't know if, looking at it now, that I can support it. I don't know if I want to not support it either, because I like it, I just don't like, I think a lot of it, schools already do, and I think Joe can tell me some of the things that the schools already have our own internal watchdog that addresses a lot of what she was saying. And I would love to hear him discuss that a little bit. Again, I know we've talked about it before, and I also still have some reservation about it. Very little wording about gender, which I would still would have liked to have seen added in there. I think that's a major demographic that's been left out. So I still have some fairly large reservations.
Well, we can continue, we can move forward with the motion and have a split vote if we want. We can wait and work some more with Select Board Member Roberts. I'm happy to reach out to her either way tomorrow. Up to the committee, we have a motion on the table right now.
Chris, do you want to work together for a day and see if we can't work out some of the things?
Yeah, what I've been, and I'd like to confirm Lindsay's observation that Deborah Roberts has not only been very open to feedback, but very amenable to making changes, especially in the spirit of collaboration. So
That would be great.
So that's one of the reasons why I would feel comfortable supporting this at this point, because she's looking for someone to co-present a town meeting, and if it's the chair, chances are pretty good I'm going to end up being that person. So I would want to feel comfortable with this as well.
Yeah, if
But
our feet are going to be held to the fire for that, and we're expected to present our support, then I want to be very comfortable with the language.
Okay, so but we can talk offline about what that might look like. But if you have, it really depends on the strength of your reservations as to whether or not you support the motion that's on the table right now.
Yeah, at this point, it would be a split vote for me.
Joe, you had something to add?
Yeah, regardless of how you decide to go, the timeliness of this is very important, and the reason is it's going forward to town meeting, and as you know, town meeting is very, they don't like a lot of change of language on town meeting floor.
Right.
So, and I know that the printing of the warrant's going to be coming up and all of that, so I would defer to the select board member Roberts on this, but if one of you or a member of the committee could reach out about that timeliness, because if you're going in, regardless what you want to do with all kinds of scratches and additions from what's in the warrant, you know what happens at town meeting. People become a little worried about making those changes, just an FYI.
Yeah.
Armando, you had something?
I was going to ask, is there a timeline?
Okay, that was a good question. That was an excellent question, and that was me not asking that beforehand, so. All right, so we do have a motion on the table. Do we feel comfortable moving forward with that motion, even if it's a split vote? Even if it's, whatever happens, we can still certainly try to reach out to Deborah Roberts and ask about changes and that. I mean, this is going into the warrant, yes.
We may have a meeting next week, so
Yes.
can we just wait until next week?
We can ask if that's certainly, and even if, they can't add any more language or something, we can take it up again next week as well. So, Chris, you still want to move forward with the motion, or?
I do.
Okay, so we do have the motion on the table. Do I have a second for Chris's motion?
I seconded it
All right.
when I rescinded
Oh,
mine.
Thank you, Lizzie. Thank you.
Got it.
It's late. All right.
Double dipping.
All right, so we do have a motion and a second. Do I have any other motions on the table? All right, so voting on Chris's motion to support this and continue to work with Select Board Member Roberts to refine the language of the bylaw prior to town meeting. So all in favor?
Aye.
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 No.
All right, so that is a 4-1 vote. Either way, Karen, please share your reservations. I think that's very helpful for us. Again, it is moving forward. I think it's important for us to have our questions answered and feel comfortable with whatever, because if it does pass, we will be living with it. So we'll continue with that. Moving on, correspondence, we received an email implying we're not supporting the school revote. As we've already shared, we have a number of events we're participating in and ways we're sharing information and getting out the vote. I understand the desire to see do something big and flashy. We're doing what we can. But at this point, everything helps, whether it's the biggest gesture or the smallest word of encouragement. I think I speak for all of us when I say we're very, very grateful for everyone who's made the revote happen. This is the work of a lot of people, and we're very grateful to everyone who's helping to get out the vote, everyone who is going to vote for this. Thank you all for fighting for what's best for the kids. And really, that's ultimately what it's about. We're working for what's best for the kids. At this point, I just also want to say thank you to everyone that I've worked with over the past 3 years. You've all pushed me and challenged me to do what's best for the kids. It's been an honor to serve, and I want to thank especially my child care village and my family, who doesn't know what to do about the fact that I will be home on evenings. So thank you all. Lindsay, I don't know if you have anything to add.
Yeah, I just want to say thank you. I tried to say this earlier and was very messy about it, but just like there are a lot of people doing the hard work of making a school district run all day, every day, and just want to say I see you all, appreciate you, and never imagined that there were this many layers to all the things that need to happen. So it's been an honor to work with this very brilliant team of administrators who are doing great things for our very brilliant students every day. So thank you for the opportunity, and thank you to the community, and just very grateful to have been able to serve Stoughton.
Yeah, and thank you again to the school committee members, past, present, future. You guys have taken a lot. You didn't know what you were getting into. You've risen to the challenge. Just very grateful for your time, for all of your questions, all of your pushing back against me. Just very grateful. Thank you.
Madam Chair, to you and to the Vice Chair. Just a couple of thoughts on behalf of the administrative team and really the Stoughton Public Schools that I think is important, especially in this day and age where role models within elected officials is hard to come by. We want to thank you for your support, for challenging us, for collaborating with us, for being professional, as I've said privately to the two of you, for being student-centered at all times, to supporting the staff. And probably, besides professionalism, the two that I believe are define who the two of you are, and that is you are kind and you are ethical. To me, that's the two most important things that come with being an elected official. Thank you for taking the chance on me without knowing me at all and voting to support my candidacy at the time. And we look forward to calling on you to volunteer and on certain days even sub, because you can now make $100 you couldn't before. But truly, we are very thankful and appreciative. Of course, we have a little something for you at the end, a little sugar, a little cake of celebration. And thank you again, and I look forward to continuing to work with you outside of these roles.
Thank you. Our next regular meeting will be Tuesday, April 15th at 7 p.m. here in the conference room at the district offices at 31 Pierce Street. We are talking about having an additional meeting on Tuesday, April 1st. That may be a special meeting, so those details to be worked out. So, and that would likely be at our regular time, 7 p.m. public meeting and possibly 6 p.m. executive session. At this point, we need to go back into executive session. So I need Lindsay to work her motion magic.
I make a motion that we adjourn that we re-enter executive session for the purposes listed on the agenda and adjourn from there without returning to open session.
All right, thank you. So we're going to take a 5-minute break. Thank everyone for coming. Good night, and we're going to roll call vote. That's right, we need to vote.
Aye.
Aye.
Did somebody second my motion?
Oh, no, we need to second your motion too.
Aye.
All right. So second.
Aye.
All right.
No.
You didn't mean that.
All right. So we are going to take a 5-minute break, go back into executive session, and thank everyone.
Do you guys want us out of executive session?
No, I think we're going to go straight into
But